In our previous episode, we examined the claim that the prophecies in the Bible lead us to believe in God. But we found that they do not lead us to that conclusion. Let's move on from prophecy, now, to the next reason believers give to back up their claim that the Bible shows divine inspiration: miracles. The Bible does indeed describe a lot of miracles. But then, so do other sacred books. None of us were around to witness those miracles, so how do we know they happened? We don't. But some of them are so implausible, or self-contradictory, that we can safely say that they could not have happened. In the book of Genesis we have the story of Noah's flood, when it rained for 40 days. And the waters covered over the highest mountains on earth. We are told that 2 to 7 of each species of animal was placed into an ark with less than 45,000 cubic meters of space. But the minimum amount of space required would be over 17 million cubic meters. At least 4 times larger than the biggest ship ever built. In other words, the ark was about 1/4% as large as it needed to be. Since we are told that everything outside of the ark died, then every species of whale must have been aboard the ark, especially since they wouldn't be able to take a breath through their blowholes with the extreme rate of rainfall. That means some huge aquariums would have been taking up most of the space on the ark, and weighing it down beyond what the wooden ship could possibly handle. But an even greater miracle is how Noah, a 500-year-old man at the time, according to the Bible, and his 3 sons managed to round up all these animals from across the globe, and put them back afterwards. And perhaps an even greater miracle than this is how these 4 men and their wives managed to feed, water, and clean up after millions of animals every day for a year, especially when there was only one 18-inch window to pitch all the excrement and soiled straw out of. In fact, each of the 8 people on the ark would have to clean, feed, and water more than 25 animals per second around the clock. They wouldn't have had time to eat or sleep. After about a day or 2 of such an existence on the ark, I think I would have pitched myself out that little window. And where the heck did all that water go? But we've only scratched the surface. There are too many impossibilities in the story to recount in this short video. Let's turn to the next book of the Bible, Exodus. There we are told that God killed all of the Egyptians' cattle in the 5th of the 10 plagues. The hand of the Lord will bring a terrible plague on your livestock in the field, on your horses, donkeys and camels, and on your cattle, sheep and goats. And the Lord did this thing on the next day, and all the livestock of the Egyptians died. Exodus 9:1-4 and 6. But, in the 10th and final plague, God kills the firstborn of the Egyptian cattle. And it came to pass, that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. Exodus 12:29. But there couldn't have been any firstborn cattle to kill, since all of the cattle had been killed in the 5th plague. And, in spite of having been killed twice, Egyptian horses were then ridden by Pharaoh and his men into the Red Sea. Perhaps this 3rd killing of their horses, this time by drowning, finally did the trick. The writers of Exodus were evidently prone to this type of error. They also made it when telling their story about Moses versus the Egyptian magicians. There we read that Moses had turned all the water into blood. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams and canals, over the ponds and all the reservoirs, and they will turn to blood. Blood will be everywhere in Egypt, even in vessels of wood and stone." Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded. He raised his staff in the presence of Pharaoh and his officials and struck the water of the Nile, and all the water was changed into blood. The fish in the Nile died, and the river smelled so bad that the Egyptians could not drink its water. Blood was everywhere in Egypt. Exodus 7:19-21. They should have stopped their story there, but they went on to destroy any remaining shred of credibility by adding, "But the Egyptian magicians did the same thing." Exodus 7:22. But doing the same thing would have meant turning all the water into blood. But there was no water for them to turn into blood, they just told us that Moses had turned all the water into blood. Bible apologists will try to say that there was still some water somewhere for them to work the trick, but that contradicts what the Bible actually says. It says all the water everywhere was gone already, all turned to blood by Moses. These stories sound more like someone spinning a yarn, without thinking it through, than the reporting of something that could have actually happened. In the book of Numbers, chapter 22, we read of the miracle of the talking donkey. To put the story in context, this was when the Israelites, under Moses' direction, were headed toward Canaan, and passed through Moab along the way. This worried the king of Moab, who sent his men to hire the prophet Balaam to curse the Israelites. God came to Balaam at night and said to him, "If the men have come to summon you, get up and go with them, but do only what I tell you to do." So Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. But God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the road as his adversary. Numbers 22:20-22. What kind of God is this who tells you to do something, and then gets mad at you when you do it? When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it lay down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and it said to Balaam, "What have I done to you, that you have struck me these 3 times?" Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have made a fool of me. I wish I had a sword in my hand. I would kill you right now." But the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey, which you have ridden all your life to this day? Have I been in the habit of treating you this way?" And he said, "No." Numbers 22:27-30. It would take more than opening the mouth of a donkey to enable it to speak Aramaic. Donkeys don't possess the anatomy needed for the formation of such sounds. But, more than that, a donkey would not have the concepts of ownership, duty, or justice implied in the sentences it speaks here. The angel then becomes visible to Balaam and it tells him, "I have come out as an adversary, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me, and turned away from me these 3 times. If it had not turned away from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let it live." Numbers 22:32-33. If this angel was acting on the command of God, then this was an instance where God's will, to have Balaam killed, was thwarted by a donkey. This is reminiscent of God attempting to murder Moses when he was going to see Pharaoh, as God had commanded him. It must be difficult to obtain life insurance for those employed in the service of this kill-happy God. Equally incredible is what happens next. Then Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now therefore, if it is displeasing to you, I will return home." The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but speak only what I tell you to speak." But this had been the understanding from the start. So, why attempt to kill Balaam and then, due to the actions of a donkey, send him off with no change of plans? When Balaam finally stands before the Israelites' camp, he blesses rather than curses them. Yet, the Israelites later murder Balaam, and, in the New Testament he is condemned for running after gain, in total contradiction of this story in Numbers, which explicitly states that Balaam steadfastly refused to profit from going against God's will. Also, the donkey did not rebuke him for loving the wages of wickedness, as 2 Peter implies. Greed is an abstract human concept that a donkey would not comprehend. Rather, according to the book of Numbers, the animal reacted to being beaten. If the New Testament account of Balaam is true, then the Old Testament account is false. And, if it's false, then the miracle it relates is even more suspect, and cannot be used to bolster a belief in divine inspiration. If God was behind the writing of the Bible, it would have at least made sure the writers got their stories straight. So, maybe the real miracle in all of this is that anyone can read about Balaam and his talking donkey, and still believe the Bible was inspired by an intelligent and just God. In the Bible book of Joshua we are told on the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel's son, "Stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ayalon." So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Yeshar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Joshua 10:12-14. According to the Bible itself, this is false. It records many instances of the Lord listening to a human being and fighting for Israel, both before and after this event. Knowing that part of this passage is false, it does not give us much confidence in the miracle it relates. This miracle is predicated on a primitive view of the solar system that we know to be false. It assumes that the sun and moon are stuck up in the dome of the firmament a little ways above our heads, and that they roll around this dome, circling the earth. Today we know that there is no firmament, and while the moon does orbit the earth, the sun does not, rather it is the earth that orbits the sun. In order for the miracle of Joshua to have taken place, it is the earth that would have had to stop spinning, and the moon would have had to stop orbiting our planet. The sun itself wouldn't have had to do anything. But, if the moon stopped in its orbit, and the earth stopped spinning for several hours, these events would not have gone unnoticed. Babylonian astrologers studied celestial phenomena such as the movements of planets, stars, and constellations. Astrology was also practiced in ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, India, and other cultures across the globe. They would have noticed the sun standing still for about a day, and would have recorded this event. We have their writings from this period, but no one mentions this extraordinary incident. But astrologers aren't the only ones who would have noticed. The sudden halting of the Earth's turning, from 1,000 miles per hour to zero, would result in worldwide catastrophes, including tsunamis, flooding, and earthquakes. The moon orbits the Earth at over 2,000 miles per hour. Its motion is what keeps it from falling to the Earth. If it stopped in its orbit, tides would cease, and marine navigation would be disrupted. People would have noticed. No one did. So, this miracle never happened. Speaking of astrologers brings us to our final miracle, one involving Jesus. The star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. Matthew 2:9. This one is predicated on a belief at odds with what we now know about stars. They are not little lights stuck up in the firmament a little ways above our heads, as the Bible writers evidently believed. The nearest star, after the sun, is over 4 light-years away from us. The Earth is constantly turning, the star's position in our sky changes with it. In order for a star to appear to have stopped, it would actually have to move to counteract the effect of the Earth's turning. That would involve it moving at the rate of 37,400 billion miles per hour, over 4 years before the birth of Jesus, to correspond with the precise time that the astrologers would be looking at the sky, 4+ years later. But, the stars are so distant from us that if you move your head slightly, the star will appear to be over a different local landmark. Each of the astrologers would have seen it over a different house. So, it just makes no sense whatsoever to say that a star stopped over a place on Earth. The miracles we've looked at could not have happened. This makes the other miracles in the Bible, for which we have no evidence, all the more suspect. Which is more likely? That the laws of physics were violated, or that men lied? Having discussed prophecies and miracles of the Bible, in the next episode we'll take a look at the morality of the Bible.